It's truly shocking that the NSA is violating these surveillance laws thousands of times every year, effectively about 7 times a day, in part because these laws are extraordinarily permissive. These aren't laws that impose meaningful constrictions on the NSA. They essentially allow the NSA to collect vast quantities of information about Americans' communications inside the United States and as we communicate internationally. So the fact that they're violating these very permissive laws is truly shocking. But I think even more fundamentally, the disclosures really undermine the intelligence community's primary defense of these programs, which is that they are heavily regulated and overseen. We now know that that's simply not true. Congress has not been able to effectively oversee the NSA surveillance machinery. Now we know that the FISA court, the secret court that's charged with overseeing the NSA, is not able to, and in its own words, doesn't think it has the capacity to effectively oversee the NSA. So for all of these years, the government has been claiming this is a regulated surveillance complex, and in fact, the fox has been guarding the hen house for far too long, and it needs to stop.
Well, but even with these revelations, government officials seem to indicate that these are not deliberate violations, but inadvertent problems in terms of how they're gathering and sifting data, and that they're relatively small compared to the huge volume of what they're actually doing. Do you buy that argument?
Well, the NSA has, for the past months in defending these programs, used word games when it talks about the consequences of these policies for Americans' privacy. They use words like targeted, incidental, and inadvertent to really obscure what's going on. And the fact of the matter is that these laws allow the government to listen in on Americans' phone calls and to read Americans' emails in an extraordinary number of circumstances, and the government has not been forthcoming about that authority, and they're not being forthcoming now when they suggest that these violations are minimal. These are thousands of violations every year, and each violation could affect hundreds or even thousands of Americans, but we still don't have the basic facts to have that debate.
And just that significance of the error, 202, they're supposed to be monitoring 20 Egypt, and they're monitoring 202. They say it was just a clerical error. What does that mean?
That means that thousands of calls made in D.C. were swept up into an NSA database when the NSA was supposed to have been targeting Egypt abroad.
And did they get purged?
We don't know enough about that story yet, and that's a big part of the problem, is that there's still not enough transparency. The public debate we're having now is incredible, and it was instigated by whistleblowers, leaks, but the fact that we had to wait for those leaks to have this conversation is problematic.
And the significance of U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton, the judge with the chief judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, saying we have to rely on the accuracy of the information that's provided to us by the court, so to provide it to us by the NSA.
That's exactly right. We're letting the NSA police itself, and now we know the consequences are that there are thousands of abuses each year that affect untold number of Americans. But if you look back at what the government told the Supreme Court last year, they were defending the law that allows it to engage in this sort of dragnet surveillance of our international communications. And the primary defense of the government was, don't worry about the NSA. The secret court in Washington is protecting the right to privacy of the countless Americans in the country. And now we have the court itself saying that it doesn't have the capacity to review the government's claims that it's abiding by the law. That's a truly shocking revelation.
And of course, these more than 2,000 mistakes that the audit found are only in the Washington, D.C. area where NSA is working. And people like Edward Snowden were working in Hawaii as a contractor for the NSA. So other parts of the NSA that were not in the Washington area are not even included in this audit.
Absolutely. We still don't know the full extent of the abuses of the NSA of these very permissive laws. They have a number of listening facilities. The number could be significantly higher. And even more importantly, each one of those incidents doesn't just relate to a single person. One incident, for example, was the sweeping in of D.C. communications instead of Egypt communications, affecting potentially thousands of people. So the number could be much, much higher, but we still need more disclosures for the government. If the administration truly welcomes this debate, it needs to give the public the facts it needs to have the debate.
According to the New York Times, Alex, the NSA is searching the content of virtually every email that comes into or goes out of the United States without a warrant. You've written about this.
That's exactly right. The law that Congress passed in 2008 gives the government essentially unfettered authority to read and listen to our international communications. Now we know they're doing it with a dragnet by literally sifting through every single email that goes into or out of the country. You simply don't need that sort of authority to defend America. The government should be targeting terrorists, targeting wrongdoers, not indiscriminately surveilling Americans inside the country.
And the news yesterday, though it wasn't clear if it was true that that Clapper, James Clapper, who we know lied to Congress on this issue, would be the one that President Obama would put in charge of the review of the NSA?
That's right. The president promised an independent review of the NSA surveillance activities, and news broke that the director of national intelligence might be the one overseeing that review. That would be to add insult to injury. The review needs to be independent. We need Congress to get involved, too, to have a full and meaningful review of these disclosures and their consequences for millions of Americans. And that can't happen when we allow the NSA to police itself.
ACLU representing Edward Snowden?
I can't comment on that. We are coordinating his legal defense within the country, but I can't say any more than that.